The signal that stopped the starset began on a Thursday, not that Thursdays mattered in the deep black. But for Commander Shiva Ren of the Elorian Starfleet, time still held weight. Her ship, the Drossaveil, drifted near the outer rim of Sector 12, watching, waiting, scanning for the usual background noise of galaxies whispering to one another. Yet that day, something strange happened. Something terrifying. Earth stopped talking. For centuries, the humans had been loud. Their songs traveled far, sometimes crude, sometimes beautiful. Their laughter echoed in subspace, their debates crackled on long-wave frequencies, and their countless beacons blinked like fireflies in the dark. No other species spoke so much or so often. They told stories to the void, not caring if anyone listened, but now, silence. "Repeat the scan," Shiva said, her voice a low hum through the bridge. She didn't believe it. Couldn't. The humans had survived black hole flares, viral wars, even their own near extinction. They were too stubborn, too loud, too alive to go. Silent. The sensor tech, a small insectoid being with shimmering scales, tapped at the console. "Confirmed. All frequencies are dead. Planetary systems show no digital traffic. All Earth satellites are offline. No life signals detected." A cold feeling pressed into Shiva's chest. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was wrongness, like watching a fire freeze or hearing a newborn never cry. She remembered her visit to Earth 10 cycles ago. The humans had welcomed her with music, stories, even food tailored to her biology. One child had drawn a picture of her with crayons, calling her Star Auntie. She kept that drawing in her cabin, folded neatly between datapads. The silence wasn't just technological, it was emotional. The galaxy felt it. Across hundreds of systems, beings paused mid-work. Farmers stopped in their fields. Warships lowered their shields. Even criminal syndicates halted transmissions. It was like every species felt an ancient instinct stir. Something had gone wrong with the center of the story. And that center was Earth. Back on the bridge, a quiet voice spoke through the comms. It was Ambassador Threngil of the Narrated Collective. "We are sending recon vessels to Earth. Request joint investigation." Others joined. The Zarkin, the Lumari, even the Havith, who hadn't spoken to anyone in 70 years. They all wanted answers. Needed answers. But Shiva knew something no one else did. She had seen the last message. Hours before the silence. She had received a private burst transmission from a human named Dr. Elias Tran. He had been a xenopsychologist, a man who believed humanity had a spiritual connection to the universe, something deeper than logic or science. In the message, his face looked tired but calm. "If you're seeing this," he had said, "then we're gone. Or at least, we've stopped. But know this, it was our choice, not one of fear. Something came to us, not a weapon, not a virus. Something ancient, and we listened. Maybe we shouldn't have. But maybe we had to." He looked off camera then, eyes wide. "Not with terror, with awe. We didn't die. We changed. And if the galaxy holds its breath long enough, it might hear what we became." Then, static. Commander Shiva had replayed that message 23 times. Not because she didn't believe it, but because she felt something in his words. The tone. The weight behind each syllable. It was like he had been standing on the edge of something eternal, and he had stepped off, willingly. And now, the galaxy waited. But Shiva couldn't wait. She submitted a request to the Elorian High Council for immediate clearance to visit Earth's orbit. She did not wait for approval. Her crew followed without question. They knew the silence wasn't absence. It was a signal of a different kind, something bigger than them, something possibly bigger than everything. As the Drossaveil moved toward the pale blue planet, The stars around them flickered, dimming, then glowing stronger. The closer they got to Earth, the more strange energy patterns began to appear, colors no instrument could name, pulses that made the crew dream of long-dead ancestors. Whispers in languages never recorded. And in her cabin, Shiva unfolded the child's drawing one more time. It was of Earth, and next to it, a shadowy figure with glowing eyes. The child had written 2 words in shaky letters beneath it: "We changed." And Shiva whispered back to the silence, "Then show us what you became." Ghosts of a living world's Drasa veil entered Earth's orbit with caution. The ship's hull creaked under unseen pressure, though space outside seemed calm. The atmosphere below shimmered strangely, as if wrapped in thin, flowing layers of light that moved like water over glass. Commander Shiva stood at the main viewport, staring down at the planet that once pulsed with so much life. Now it looked the same, yet felt utterly different. Blue oceans, green lands, white clouds, nothing looked broken. But it was too still. Atmosphere is breathable. Radiation levels normal, reported the sensor tech. But there's a signal. It's not like anything we've seen before. It's not radio, not magnetic, not even psychic. It's music, but it's not being played. Shiva narrowed her eyes. Music that's not being played? We hear it in our minds, but the instruments show no source. Shiva pressed a button on the console. Play it. At first, there was nothing. Then came a low hum, soft and endless. Like a choir of wind and starlight. It had no melody, no beat, yet it stirred something deep inside the crew. Even the insectoid tech's wings twitched as if remembering a long-forgotten lullaby. "Commander," said the pilot, voice quiet, "I think the planet is ... singing." Shiva didn't reply. She was lost in thought, her memory drifting back to Dr. Tran's last words, "We didn't die. We changed." She turned to the crew. "Prepare the drop pod. I'm going down." Her second officer, Larn, a tall feline from the Marashi system, stepped forward. "We should go with you. It's not safe." "That's exactly why I have to go alone," Shiva said. "If this world changed, it might not trust more than one at a time, if it even trusts at all." After a silent pause, Larn nodded. "Soon." Shiva stood alone inside the sleek black pod. As it detached from the ship, the silence returned, wrapping her like a blanket. She descended toward the Earth's surface, unsure of what would greet her. The pod broke through the atmosphere with a soft hiss, not the usual roar. Clouds parted without resistance. Wings held steady. Everything felt ... jided. She landed in what was once Central Europe, near an old city called Prague. The buildings were untouched. No broken windows. No fire damage. Cars remained parked neatly, untouched for years. It looked like people had simply walked away midlife. Shiva stepped out slowly. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of flowers and whetstone. No insects buzzed, no birds chirped. But the quiet was not empty. It was full, as if something watched from every corner. Then something moved. A shadow passed across the ground. Not a person, not an animal. It shifted too smoothly, like ink in water. Shiva raised her scanner. Nothing. But in her ears, the hum grew louder, not threatening, but curious. She stepped into an open square. Old statues stood untouched. Fountains still flowed. And on the steps of an ancient library sat a figure. Human. Or at least it looked human. A young girl with dark skin and silver eyes stared at Shiva. Her body shimmered slightly, like light reflected through crystal. No fear, just calm awareness. Double quotes. "Hello," Shiva said gently. The girl tilted her head. "You came. I thought it would be longer." Shiva's breath caught. The voice was soft, but not childish. It carried weight, like a whisper from a storm. Are you human? Yes and no. We were, then we weren't, now. We are. Something between. What happened here? The girl stood, her movement smooth, almost weightless. We listened to something no one else could hear. We followed it inward. It took us beyond time, beyond need. We're not dead, Commander. We're awake. Where are the others? Everywhere, the girl said. This city, this planet. The music you hear, that's us. Shiva stepped closer. Why did you go silent? Because the galaxy wasn't ready to hear what we became. Silence is the only way to be heard by those who refuse to listen. A gust of wind moved through the square, but it didn't feel natural. It carried voices, laughter, cries, memories, all overlapping like distant dreams. Shiva closed her eyes, and for a moment, she felt them. Millions of humans, but not as bodies, as waves, as presence. They hadn't disappeared. They had transformed. Will you return? She asked quietly. The girl smiled. Not yet. The galaxy still fears what it doesn't control, but we'll wait. And when it listens with an open heart, we'll speak. The girl began to fade, not vanish, just become part of the light. Wait, Shiva called out. What do I tell them? The answer came as a whisper from every wall, every tree, every stone around her. Tell them Earth didn't fall. It ascended. Whispers across the council. Return of Commander Shiva Ren shook the Elorian High Command. She didn't bring back human prisoners or ancient weapons. She brought back only a recording, not of images, not of data, but of presence. A sound no machine could fully analyze. A voice not spoken with words. They called an emergency gathering at the Galactic Central Council, the meeting ground for all known civilizations. 27 species filled the hall. Their faces were carved with worry. The silence of Earth had unsettled everyone, but Shiva's report was worse. Humans hadn't died. They had become something else. They are not spirits, Shiva said, her voice calm but firm, standing in the golden chamber beneath the twin moons of Selûne. They are not extinct. They have changed into a form we cannot touch or measure, but one we can feel. The Earth is alive in a way none of us understand. Some scoffed. Others grew quiet. Ambassador Julian of the Varine, a crystalline being of sharp logic, stood. This is not possible. Matter cannot shift to energy without destruction. And consciousness cannot survive such a leap. Shiva met his gaze. Then explain, the voice that greeted me. Explain the way the trees spoke in emotion. Explain the music that followed me, even here. She touched her chest. I still hear it. There was silence. Then came laughter, dry and short. It was Chancellor Grax, the old warlord of the Brimari. Union, a species once at war with humanity. This is just like the humans, he said. Even in their disappearance, they find a way to make the galaxy revolve around them. Always mysterious, always emotional. They never fought with strength, they fought with stories. He leaned forward, his tusks catching the hall's light, and now we sit here, debating feelings? The council murmured. But then came a new sound. A hum. It started in the ceiling. Or maybe the floor, or maybe inside each being's own head. It was the same sound Shiva had brought from Earth. Soft, endless, not painful, but haunting. Everyone froze. A few delegates reached for weapons. But the sound faded just as quickly as it came. Shiva didn't move. They're listening, she said quietly. They heard you, Grax. Good, he growled. Let them. But deep inside, even Grax felt something he couldn't name, like the moment before lightning strikes, or standing at the edge of an ocean that knows your name. After the meeting, many council members stayed behind, shaken. Ambassador Kalen of the Dren species, long allies of humanity, approached Shiva in the corridor. His eyes glowed with worry. "If what you say is true," he whispered, "then Earth is no longer a planet. It's single quotes s dot 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 Adam mad." Shiva didn't answer right away. She remembered the girl in the square, remembered how the buildings whispered, how the wind carried memories. Double quotes no, she said finally. They don't want to be worshipped. They just want to be understood. Kalen nodded slowly. And if we fail? Shiva looked out toward the stars. Then the galaxy will be left behind. That night, in deep space, 5 scout ships from the Rim species entered Earth's orbit without permission. They had not heard the Council's warnings. Or maybe they didn't care. The crew scanned the surface, searching for treasure, knowledge, anything of value. Humans had once been unpredictable. Maybe now they were vulnerable. They sent drones to the ground. The drones didn't come back. The scouts laughed. Earth eats machines now? Then came the visions. Each crew member saw something different. One saw his dead brother standing in the airlock. One heard the voice of her unborn child whispering secrets. Another fell to his knees, weeping at the sight of a city floating in the sky, filled with light. The ships turned back. They said nothing. But the galaxy noticed. Within 3 days, no ship entered Earth's space again. Not because they were afraid of death, but because they had felt something more terrifying, truth. The human who never left far beneath the Earth's surface, deep inside a forgotten mountain once called Mont Blanc, something stirred. Not a weapon. Not a machine. A man. His name was Jonah Hawley. And he was the last human who had not changed. He didn't. Know why? Well, the rest of humanity had answered the call. The signal that came like a song woven into light and memory, Jonah had hidden. Not because he was brave, not because he wanted to resist. He had simply been afraid. When the signal reached the minds of every human on Earth, inviting them to step beyond the limits of flesh and time, Jonah curled up in the shelter he built after the collapse. Surrounded by old books, canned food, and static-filled radios, he waited for it to pass, but it never did. Instead, the world grew quiet. Not dead. Just different. Jonah didn't understand what had happened, but he felt it. The air around him had changed. The trees didn't rustle the same way. The stars blinked in new rhythms. And the silence wasn't lonely. It watched him. He walked the empty streets of Geneva once just to see. Everything was in place, cars still parked, lights still blinking on solar power, but not a single person remained. Only echoes, like memories woven into the world itself, and sometimes he heard them. A mother's laugh in the wind. A child's footsteps on stone. His own name whispered from empty windows, but no bodies. No. Graves. They had gone somewhere he could not follow. He hated them for it. And missed them more than anything. Above. On the Drasa Vale, Commander Shiva stared at the strange reading on her monitor. A pulse, faint, but human. Not energy, not memory. Flesh and blood. We have a living human, she said. LARN single quotes S ears perked up. But how? I thought they all, so did I, set course for Mont Blanc. When the shuttle landed, the world was different than before. The trees around the mountain bowed slightly as the Elorian crew walked past, not from wind, but as if acknowledging them. Light moved in slow waves through the forest, brushing their armor with gold. Shiva led the way into the caves. Following the signal. Jonah heard them before he saw them, the crunch of boots, the soft hum of alien technology. Then, for the first time in years, a voice that wasn't made of wind or memory. Jonah Hawley? Shiva called into the cave. He stepped out of the shadows, blinking against their soft lights. He looked thin, worn, but alive. His beard had grown long. His clothes were patched. But his eyes, they still burned with something sharp. You're not ghosts, he said. Or whatever they became. We're not, Shiva answered gently. But they are not ghosts either, Jonah scoffed. They left. Shiva shook her head. No, they changed. They're still here. Jonah looked around. Yeah, I feel them, watching, whispering, but they don't speak to me. They didn't take me. Do you want to go with them? He hesitated. I don't know. Why did you stay? His voice cracked. Because I was scared. Because I didn't want to die. Because ... I didn't believe it was real. I thought it was a trap. I thought the world was ending, not ... transforming. Shiva stepped closer. Maybe you weren't left behind. Maybe you were meant to be a bridge. A bridge? He asked, bitter. You still walk as flesh. They move as light. But you remember their laughter. You remember what it was to be human. Maybe you're the story they left behind for the rest of the galaxy. Jonah laughed once, dry and broken. A story? No one cares about stories anymore. You're wrong, Shiva said softly. The galaxy was built on them. Humans knew that. They told stories even when no one listened. Jonah fell quiet above them. The cave shimmered faintly. Symbols appeared on the stone, glowing words in languages long lost. Jonah stared at them. What is that? Shiva looked up, her eyes wide. They're responding to you. Jonah reached out and touched one of the glowing words, and for the first time he heard them, not as whispers, but as voices, full and clear, his mother's voice, his sister's laugh, his father's song. They were there. Not dead. Not gone. Waiting. He fell to his knees, tears in his eyes. They didn't leave me. He whispered. Shiva knelt beside him. No, she said. They were waiting for you to remember who you are. And far above, on every listening station, across the stars, the silence of Earth shifted once more. A new signal began to pulse, not just a hum, but a voice. Human. The voice that shattered Silence signal began as a single steady tone, low and soft, like a heartbeat echoing across the stars. Then it shifted. Not louder, but deeper. It became layered, like many voices singing one truth. In every galactic system, receivers lit up, alarms blared. Technicians scrambled. Commanders woke from sleep. Scholars dropped their tablets. Even planets where sound held no meaning felt a change in their gravity. In their air, in their pulse. It wasn't noise. It was a presence. And it spoke. Not in any known language, but all species understood it, because the message wasn't in words, it was in feeling. We remember. The galaxy stopped. On the Drasa Veil, Shiva stood frozen at the come screen. The voice had come through their systems, yet it hadn't been transmitted. It had arrived. Like a dream that touched every mind at once. Commander, Larn whispered. That was them, Shiva nodded slowly. Yes, it was. Beside her, Jonah stood silent. He had been the first to hear it clearly. Not just as a message, but as a memory. He saw images no one else saw. Cities made of golden glass, people without bodies, songs that bent time, a sea that whispered names. He saw the future humanity had become, and they weren't angry. They weren't gods. They were guardians. Earth was now more than a planet. It was a soul. And it was awake. Across the council worlds, debate erupted on Kaldrex. The mantid species held emergency prayer ceremonies, believing the voice to be a divine ascension. On the desert moon of Trella, machines paused their centuries-old construction to recalibrate their purpose. The message had reached even them on Verkan. A species who once enslaved humans wept for the first time in their recorded history, and on the Central Galactic Council station, fear and wonder clashed in every chamber. Ambassador Threngel addressed the assembly. We always saw humans as chaotic, emotional, strange, and yet, in their silence, they have become something more. I ask you, Are we witnessing extinction or evolution? Grax of the Brimari slammed his fist into the table. This is dangerous. A race without limits is a race without rules. They could rewrite what it means to exist. Thren turned to him. And perhaps that is the lesson. Some nodded. Others remained silent. For the first time, the galaxy's most powerful beings had no answers. Back on Earth, Jonah sat beneath a tree that hadn't existed the day before. It was tall, with leaves made of shimmering threads. They moved in patterns, like breathing. He could hear whispers inside each branch, voices of those who had stepped beyond. Shiva sat beside him. They're not calling anyone else, she said. Not yet, Jonah nodded. They're waiting. For what? He looked up. For us to stop being afraid of becoming more. He turned to her, his voice soft. Do you think they'll ever come back? In physical form? Shiva didn't answer immediately. Instead, she touched the ground. The soil pulsed under her fingers. Warm, alive, it responded like a heartbeat. Maybe they already have, she said. Just not how we expected. Suddenly the air shimmered. Not hot, not cold, something between. And in the space before them, a figure appeared, not solid, not shadow, but shaped like a young woman, the same girl Shiva had seen in Prague. You're ready now, the girl said. Jonah stood. Ready for what? To choose. The girl pointed to the sky. Above them, a doorway opened, not a portal in the usual sense, but a tear in space shaped like a memory. Inside it, images danced, pasts, futures, feelings, stars being born, love unspoken, kindness remembered. Jonah stared. If I go, do I leave myself behind? The girl shook her head. No. You carry yourself forward. Shiva watched, heart pounding. Jonah looked at her. What if I stay? Then you remain the last bridge, she said, but you won't be alone anymore. Not truly. He turned back to the doorway. It pulsed gently, like a breath waiting to be taken. Then he smiled. Tell them I'm not gone, he said. Tell them I just want to listen. And he stepped through. The doorway closed behind him, not with a flash, but a soft note, like the final key of a song that never ends. And the earth sighed, not in sadness, but in peace, because one more piece had found its place. The day the stars changed course, days passed. Then weeks. But time no longer moved the same around Earth. Ships that flew near its orbit reported strange delays, minutes lost or gained with no explanation. Star maps began to shift slightly, as if the planet's gravity now touched more than mass. Deep space beacons flickered when facing Earth, not in distress, but in rhythm, like they were blinking along to something unseen. And in the minds of sentient beings across the galaxy, dreams began to change. The dreams were always different. Old lovers returned. Lost children smiled again. Ancestors offered silent wisdom. Even beings with no known sleep cycle entered states of stillness, claiming they had heard Earth calling their true name. It was no longer just Jonah Hale who was touched. Earth had begun to respond to the galaxy. On the Galactic Central Council, fear returned. This time it was colder. More desperate. Ambassador Seltern of the Tylari stood at the center of the chamber. Her voice was like cracked stone, sharp and shaking. We cannot ignore this. This is not evolution. This is interference. Earth is affecting reality in ways that defy known science. Navigation is changing. Memory is changing. Our people are changing. Grax of the Brimari, once loud and proud, now sat quieter. The dreams had reached even him. He no longer roared with rage, only whispered questions he never used to ask. Thren, ever calm, replied with tired eyes. What do you propose? We strike a planet that has become something more than matter? Seltrin snapped. We isolate it. We seal the sector. Nothing goes in or out. Murmurs spread like ripples, but far above them, something else stirred. From deep space, an ancient machine world named Kyneth 4 awakened. It had once warred against humanity, cold logic battling warm hearts. They had lost. They had faded. Now, their core intelligence blinked alive for the first time in 600 years. Human signal. Detected. It whispered. Double quotes music. Beautiful. And for the first time, Kyneth 4 spoke not to itself, but to the galaxy. We wish to learn again. It sent a message, not in words, but in notes. Raw, aching melody across deep space. And when it reached Earth, the planet sang back, not as a voice, not as a storm, but as a memory of forgiveness. Shiva stood once more on Earth's surface. The land was different now. It bloomed with strange flowers that weren't grown, they were remembered. Buildings glowed faintly, not with power, but with presence. The wind carried not sound, but stories. She had returned to meet the others, because she wasn't alone anymore. Ships had begun to arrive, not to conquer, but to understand. A Dren poet who had dreamed of lost planets, a Lumari child who could feel voices in water. A half-synthetic from Belran Prime, who claimed he heard music in metal since birth. They came as listeners. Not visitors. The human girl, now more light than body, greeted them with kindness. You came, she said. The poet bowed. We didn't know how not to. Why now? Asked the child. Because we waited, the girl replied. For the galaxy to feel, not just think. Shiva asked softly, and what will you give them? The girl looked toward the sky. Not power, not answers, only mirrors. The poet blinked. Mirrors? To see themselves, to remember what they forgot, to heal what they buried. And then she turned to Shiva. Will you stay? Shiva didn't answer right away. She thought of the council, the fear, the arguments. She thought of Jonah, now somewhere beyond form, maybe watching, maybe singing. She thought of her crew, still loyal, still waiting. Yes, she said finally. But not just to stay, to help others arrive. The girl smiled. And Earth responded. Stars above shifted slightly, not pulled, not forced, but invited. And across the universe, ships changed course. Not by orders. But by longing. Earth wasn't calling with gravity. It was calling with hope. When the galaxy listened, they came not as armies, but as pilgrims. One by one, then dozens, then hundreds. Ships of every kind, large carriers, silent gliders, fragile walkers held together by dreams and scrap, arrived in orbit around Earth. There were no weapons, no threats. Only questions carried in silence. And Earth welcomed them all. Not with words. Not with commands, but with feeling. Every visitor felt it the moment they stepped onto the surface. The ground seemed to know their names. Trees bent softly in greeting. Light flowed where it was needed. The world had no guards because it didn't fear anything. It understood everything. And in understanding, it had become unshakable. Shiva stood at the heart of what was once the city of Nairobi, now a garden of memory and light. Around her sat beings from 20 different systems. No flags, no titles. Only quiet. The human girl, still glowing with quiet strength, raised a hand. You came to ask why, she said. Many nodded. But the question is not why we changed. The question is why you stayed the same. A slow breath passed through the Tindi group. No one spoke, yet the silence was full, like standing in front of something ancient and kind and witting. A Lumari artist raised a hand. We feared losing ourselves, she said. We thought change meant death, the girl nodded. So did we, until we learned identity is not a prison. It's a beginning, A Dren philosopher asked, "Are you still human?" "Yes, and more. We are what happens when love is not limited to flesh, when memory becomes matter, when kindness becomes code." Someone asked, "Can we become like you?" The girl looked to the stars, not by force, not by copying, only by listening, by healing, by remembering what was forgotten. They all sat in silence. Then, for the first time, the ground beneath them shimmered. Not shaking, breathing, and the garden around them shifted. They saw cities built of music, floating on laughter. They saw stars cradled in human hands. They saw wars ending not in blood, but in forgiveness. They saw the possible future, not guaranteed. Not easy, but waiting. It lasted a moment, or maybe an eternity, and then it faded. Shiva turned to the girl. "What now?" "We wait," she replied. "We sing, we share. And one day, when the galaxy is ready, we'll all become the next version of ourselves." The visitors nodded. Not with understanding. But with acceptance. Years passed. Not in time, but in change. The Galactic Council was no longer the center. Earth was, not as a government. Not as a capital, but as a beacon. Those who sought power stopped at its orbit and found only reflection. Those who sought meaning walked its gardens and found only themselves. The signal continued, soft, endless, full of old warmth. And those who listened changed, some slowly, some in bursts, but always forward. Always towards something better. One day, long after the stars above had shifted and new ones were born, a child asked a question. She sat beneath the mirrored tree that whispered names and sang forgotten songs. "What happened to the humans?" she asked. And the light around her replied, "They remembered who they were, and in doing so. They reminded us all